I'm Dan Cook, Senior Editor at Ortho World, and I'm happy to welcome you to the Tech Center and this session on the innovative tech behind the OMTEC award-winning companies. Joining me this morning are Niall Casey, Chief Intellectual Property Officer and co-founder of Carlsmed. He leads the company's innovation and IP strategy and plays a critical part in guiding technology and development, including its AI-enabled solutions to design patient-specific implants and surgical plans. And also, John Gibson from Think Surgical, Vice President of Marketing, and he has extensive experience in the commercialization of disruptive technologies within the medical devices industry. Prior to joining Think Surgical, he was a product manager for the Mako Total Knee application at Stryker. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your award. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just start off by asking, there's personalized solutions as a big trend in orthopedics. Think Surgical is betting on open robotic platform. Again, another big trend in the development of enabling technology. Could you take a turn and talk about your award-winning technology and how it fits into the overall theme of orthopedic innovation?
Sure, yeah, I'll start if that's okay with you. So Carlsmed was founded on the principle that every patient is unique. Their pathology, their anatomy deserves a solution that's tailored to them. And so really starting with that as kind of the tenet of the company, we've designed a system that really is unlike anything else that's been out there. It was founded really in order to handle one patient at a time. Now we need to make sure that we can do that at scale, which is a real challenge. But getting back to understanding that particular patient's pathology, that their anatomy, and then how to divine a solution that really is tailored to them is really where I think medicine is going.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the total knee space, and if you look at the history of total knees, there was the innovation of universal instruments back in the late 90s, early 2000s. The goal of that was to make that procedure more reproducible, but those instruments were built on a bell curve of the patients, right? And so had limited options in terms of femoral valgus angle on your distal cut, rotation, all of that stuff, but it was meant to make it more reproducible, and they were cutting everyone at zero, right? Neutral alignment. You then look at, robotics coming into the space in the mid 2010s, 2016 with Mako, and what robotics provided was the ability to put implants in a way that you couldn't do with manual instrumentation just due to the limitations of how those designs were implemented. And so now, since robotics, you have kinematic alignment coming up, functional alignment, all these different alignment strategies. And so I think from Think Surgical, we think now with robotics, you can place an implant in a very customized location specific to that patient's anatomy based on the surgeon's philosophy of that patient. But then we're taking the next step further, which is closed platform robots today. You have to use a singular implant with that manufacturer, which maybe they don't have a nickel sensitive knee, maybe they don't have a more constrained option, maybe it's not the right fit for that patient. So we're taking robotics and that precision and that customization, but then giving the surgeon the choice to maybe look at 10 different implant options and say, maybe this is the better option for that patient. So we believe in the personalized alignment. We think that's where it's going. We think with the choice in implant, we're taking a step further than what other companies have.
That's great. And John, Think Surgical, created this handheld platform to kind of meet surgeons where they are in the adoption curve of robotic technology. And Niall, your company is, using 3D printed implants, data-driven feedback to create implants that kind of work with existing workflows. Can you both comment on that importance of meeting surgeons where they are in terms of developing the technology of the future?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? So as you bring a new technology to market, you need to understand that any kind of disruption in the expectations or their prior well-known procedure or process is a disruption and has an opportunity to fall by the wayside if it's not picked up appropriately. So what we tried to do when we kind of built the company was to make sure that we disrupt just enough. So their workflow is not really disrupted in a meaningful way, but the thing that they do is more important and it's tailored to their patient. So what we did is we use existing diagnostic imaging to take a picture of the patient, to describe the problem, to describe the solution, and then to fabricate that solution. And really, that diagnostic imaging already existed. And then the implant that resulted from that is just something different that's on the end of the inserter. So there's no change in surgical procedure. There's no change in the patient workup. There's no change in the OR workflow. It really is just a streamlined kind of flow that we put together with disruptions strategically placed in order to deliver a more personalized solution. But ultimately, it's the same or a very similar workflow with just enough disruption to make a difference in the outcomes for the patient.
John?
I agree with what you're saying. I think we're on the same page. And I think if you look at Think Surgical holistically, Think Surgical is actually one of the first companies in surgical robotics, started with RoboDoc back in the 1990s. It was probably too early for robotics at that time. Then they had a second generation, semi-autonomous system. Think Surgical made a big bet in 2022 when I joined, and pivoting from that large form factor semi-autonomous robot to handheld. And it was based on two hypotheses or two theses. And that was one, robots had to be smaller and easier to use. Because if you look at the trajectory right now, we're kind of stuck in this 25 to 30% market adoption. Yeah. But if you look at the industry, everyone's talking about robots. So what is the dichotomy there? Why is that? And then second was we thought implant choice. So we actually did a double-blinded study to test our hypothesis of 250 orthopedic surgeons. And the two things that came out of it were the number one feature that surgeons wanted for robotics were at 50% was easy to use and more familiar. They wanted it to work with their workflow, not disrupt it. And that includes the staff. We think handheld wireless does that. And then second is if you look at surgeons and you ask them, does your preferred robot meet your preferred implant? Right. About 53% of them say their preferred implant robot doesn't match. So they're making a clinical compromise today. Yeah. So we believe easy to use, simple robotics plus implant choice is what's going to get to, call it the late majority, early majority, and get to that mass market of 70% that aren't adopting today and giving them a clinical preference that meets them where they're at.
Yeah, well said. Now you talked about the role of post-market data, changing your approach to next generation product development. Are you seeing a shift in episodic design cycles to, from episodic design cycles to more continuous innovation?
I would say, yeah, especially at the beginning, it was really an N of one where we needed to make sure that that patient received that particular implant on their surgery day. Of course, that's not enough to build a business. It needs to be scalable. And so the design cycle, our ability, just based on our premise that everything is patient specific, allows us to innovate patient to patient. Now, we want to make sure that we have a strong and stable kind of process, but where there are, I'd say, inefficiencies that are discovered as we scale, there's a real opportunity for us to change on the fly because it's an N of one. And the next one will be the first one of the new process or of the new process improvement. We don't have to burn through 10,000 units of inventory before we do a change, or even a running change is not something that we do. We really can change from patient to patient if we discover that there is an inefficiency or something that needs tweaking. It really gives us the opportunity to treat each and every patient individually, and each process along the way can be refined and optimized as we discover roadblocks or hurdles or friction. It gives us an opportunity to really do it on the fly in a controlled environment with continuous improvement.
Yeah. John? I think if you look at consumers today, they want innovation, right? If you have an iPhone, Android, you're getting a new iOS every 6 months, 3 months, whatever that is. If you look in the med tech industry, you've got surgeons and hospitals investing $500,000 to $1 million in capital, and they want iterative improvements on their system. Some of the larger big four strategics, it takes them 4 to 5 years to come out with a new release. So I think surgical, we think if we're not innovating every year and adding features or adopting the system, we're stagnant. Yeah. And your user base gets somewhat bored, right, if they're doing the same thing. So we've been fortunate because, one, Think Surgical, we're just enabling technology and robotics. That's all we think about every day. We leave the implant innovation to our partners. So in the 3.5 years I've been there, I think we've had 12 to 14 FDA clearances across new implant lines being added, features. So we generally plan for a minor release, which is probably user experience workflow each year, and then one major release each year. So we agree with the statement, and if you're not continuing to innovate, I think you're going to get behind some of the other systems. And also it's because we're a later entrant into the market, so we have to be quick and nimble. But I think we're somewhat set up for success because we're so focused on robotics that that's all we do every day.
That's great. And both of you use data. The data feedback loop is becoming essential in orthopedics. When does that data become actionable? What is, instead of just information?
Yeah, that's a great point. So because what we do is an N of one and it's a patient by patient system, we can take recently discovered outcome data and understand how that influenced the design and the treatment of that patient, and plug in some of the successes, some of the learnings into the next patient. So it really is a built-in feedback loop because every patient is different. And what can we learn from these types of patients, these clusters of patients, these clusters of pathologies or types of anatomy? How can we learn from that, and then how can we deploy those learnings back as an input into the next patient and really grow the system? And it really is a live kind of ecosystem that relies on the outputs as inputs as we march through treating patient after patient, learning after learning.
Yeah. John?
I think data is interesting, right? I mean, if you look at the world around us, everyone wants data, all that stuff. In our industry, data, you have to be very compliant. It's highly regulated, right? There's PHI concerns, all those things. So I think it's important. But I think, Dan, what you said is probably the most important is it actionable?
Yeah.
So, I think surgical, we're looking at data, but there's two types of data, right? We can pull log files after every surgery to see what went well, what didn't go well. That goes into our product development and reviewing that. Then there's data tied to outcomes, where you put the implant, what did that lead to? But I think it's critical for companies to understand what is the data that you want to collect that is meaningful to the user or the hospital, and then how is that actionable? And if you don't answer that question on the front end, you're in danger of just having a bunch of data that doesn't tell you anything and doesn't advance either your product or outcomes.
Yeah.
So I think we're in the early stages of it. I don't think anyone's found the right answer of what is the balance. Maybe Intuitive in this space has probably done the best job at that. But I think you just need to be critical, understand what you're trying to capture, how that's actionable, because at the end of the day, if you present a surgeon with 1,000 data points, they don't know what to do with it. It's not actionable. So you're collecting data, but you're not moving the ball forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah. You've kind of talked to some of the factors that determine the success of a product technically. What about commercially and clinically? How do you take that next step in just in terms of evolving a technology for commercial success?
Yeah, I would say it's making sure that you understand the needs of the customer. I mean, it's like any commercial endeavor, trying to understand their expectations, not just the surgeon that we pitch to, but also the hospital, the economic system that supports that, the patient themselves. What are their expectations for outcomes? How do we help understand what their objectives are? Then there's also the payer side. There's not just the hospital economic system, but there's a payer, whether it's the federal government or whether it's individual private pay insurance companies. So all five of those, and then us as the device company or the technology company, all five of those really need to understand where value is and how to express that value and how to deliver on that value to make sure that it is a commercially viable endeavor. So while the patients are the ultimate end users, we pitch our technology to the surgeons, and the hospitals are the ones that we receive the PO for, and then CMS or private payers reimburse the hospital. None of them exchange value for value in the way that you would buy a car, where cash goes to the dealer and the car goes to you. So everybody has to understand that there's a trade of value, that although it's not direct, the whole system derives value from what you deliver to the patient, and making them or helping them understand their role in this economic wheel really does enable an improved commercial uptake and an opportunity for the company to make sure that we can meet all of the needs of most of those players, but most particularly, how do we meet the needs of the patient?
Yeah. John?
I think commercialization success comes down to three factors. One is product market fit. Second is user experience. Do your users enjoy using your product? And then third is timing. And what I mean by product market fit is, are you solving a problem? And is that problem worth solving?
Yeah.
Right? Because, if I look at Think Surgical's background, yes, they started in robotics, semi-autonomous, but semi-autonomous wasn't solving a problem, and surgeons thought it was cool. But when you asked them what was the value, they didn't have an answer for it. So yes, it was very cool, maybe ahead of its time, but wasn't solving a deep problem that surgeons had today.
Yeah.
Then second is user experience. Big proponent, particularly in total knees. If you have users that like using it, they talk to their surgeons, their network, right? They have residents, fellows, former chairs of their program that they talk to. One good user experience extrapolates.
Sure.
One bad user experience detracts from your commercialization. And then third is timing, right? So similar thing with Think Surgical. Maybe semi-autonomous was great. It wasn't the right timing at that point in time. So I think you need all three of those. And so if you're not solving a problem and fitting the market, and people want that, if you don't have a good user experience, and if you're not at the right time, without those three things, I think you're not gonna succeed, even if you have a really great product.
Yeah, no, agreed. And piggybacking off that and alluding to one of your previous comments, John, you talked about, creating features on the TMINI that surgeons like and want to use. And I'll throw this to you first, but I'm hoping both of you can answer it. How do you balance introducing that innovation with that need for familiarity? How do you walk that line between pushing the envelope of what's possible, but also making it comfortable for the end users?
Yeah, I think it depends on your company and your target market, right? And the reason I say that is, we're a smaller startup, so we have to be very focused in what we put our development efforts behind. If you're one of the bigger strategics, you can take some moonshots on future iteration. Robert gave a great presentation yesterday on data. We don't have the resources to dive into all of those things. So I think it starts with, we have a surgeon advisory board. They give us, because they're the primary users, the feedback and so forth. But I think a lot of companies are in danger of just listening to their top users, right? Because the top users, generally academic centers, high volume, what they can make work is very different than the average surgeon. If you look in the United States, don't quote me on the exact data, but it's something like 70% of total knees are done by surgeons doing less than 70 procedures per year. Very different than your top users. So if you only listen to the feedback from your advisory boards or KOLs, they're going to ask for features that make sense for them, and maybe too much for the standard orthopedic surgeon or the average user. So I think it starts with user needs, making sure you understand that, not just developing for one specific person or one specific surgeon. And then two is, who are you going after with your innovation, right? So if you're doing something like autonomous or something further on, you're going after the early adopter, innovator stage. They're the ones that always try the new tech. They're willing to put up with challenges in the adoption curve because they want to be on the forefront. So that's where you place your big bets, but that's a very small market, and you need to adopt after that. Where Think Surgical, we're going after the early majority, late adopters, so our path is very different about making it easy to use. So I think you have to balance that, but I think it's a combination of where your company is, what resources you have, but ultimately not just developing for a small cohort of 5 surgeons, but looking at the mass market.
That's great.
Yeah, I think, a couple of great points there, John. We want to make our technology as frictionless as possible. There's an opportunity to put too many bells and whistles on nearly anything. Really distilling it down to the information that they find most relevant, whether it's reported outcome data, whether it's a particular metric that they're interested in for that patient or that type of patient, but really distilling it down into actionable metrics that they can understand and not overloading them with information. Using things that are standard part of their protocol, but maybe using them at a higher order. So, traditional diagnostic imaging, they were just pictures that you look at, and maybe you draw some lines on it to understand angles and spatial relationships. But what if those three-dimensional images could be used for something more? And I think like you brought up yesterday's keynote speech, the data that's available to a Stryker is different than the data that's available to just a general surgeon, right? Stryker has an ecosystem where they can pull from every device. I mean, they have an entire operating room suite that is collecting data. A surgeon during the operation or even preceding the operation probably wants to focus on a few key metrics. And what we can do is help distill those metrics so that they can understand them a little better. And we can bake correction plans into the physical implant so that they're not kind of futzing with things and trying to achieve objectives intraoperatively that are very difficult, but they're in fact baked into the device that they install, that they implant, and it gives them the desired alignment and correction and meets their expectations when the patient is up and is ready to resume life. So making sure that we operate in a kind of seamless, frictionless fashion, but ultimately improve the outcomes and deliver a higher order solution.
Great. Looking internally, both your companies are making great strides in terms of disrupting markets and really gained some momentum recently. How do you look internally, work as an internal team to develop these innovative designs and challenge the status quo for strategic growth? What fuels you guys internally?
Really, it's the patient for us. Every patient, we get to know them through their imaging. We get to appreciate their pathology, their problems, as described by their physician and their surgeon. And really, that's what drives and inspires everyone. It's not a difficult thing to want to achieve helping a patient. That is probably the reason why most of us are in the audience and most of us are up here on stage is an opportunity to help improve somebody's life. So, that spirit carries throughout our organization, whether it's the quality department, whether it's the compliance department, or whether it is, in fact, in the R&D department, in the technology department. That is pervasive throughout our organization. And we try to identify that during our candidate screening. We make sure that we understand that our goals are aligned when we hire talent, so that this is an easy job to get up and work your butt off for, knowing that a patient is on the other end of it every single time.
Yeah. I think that's why I came to Think Surgical was disruption, challenging the status quo. I'm probably a glutton for punishment, but I really enjoyed my time with the market leader when they were the first robot in the market. And that was at a time when people were saying, do you need a robot to do joint replacement? Obviously, look at Stryker's success. They've done very well.
Yeah.
But when I got the call to come to Think Surgical, the reason I came was I thought it was refreshing. If you look at the other systems that came on the market, everyone was trying to be like the market leader. And I meant that in two fashions, right? Form factor, right? So it was a big box robot. They thought everyone had a definition of what a robot should look like based on the success that the market leader had. And then two is, Stryker started the closed platform market, right?
Yeah.
If you want our robot, you have to use our implant. And the two things that I liked about Think Surgical is they were challenging two facets of what robotics was in the market. And that was one, I think we're challenging in terms of what the definition of a robot is and what the form factor is. You don't need a 700-pound machine to give you the same accuracy as a handheld wireless.
Right.
As a marketing executive, it's very rare that you can say you're the only. We have 3 onlys in our business right now. We're the only overhead tracking system. Everyone else is sideline of sight.
Yeah.
So we challenge that model. We're the only handheld wireless device on the market. And then third, we're the only open platform system on the market. And I think a lot of people, the industry told you had to be a closed platform, right? Because of regulatory compliance and none of the big strategics would get on board. So I think Surgical, we've now added 9 implant partners or distribution agreements. And then recently, earlier this year, not in partnership with Stryker, but we added Stryker clearance to our platform. And what that told the market is you do not have to have formal partnerships. There is a way to be truly implant agnostic. And that paves the way for us to, in effect, add any implant system that we want.
Yeah.
That could be based on, market share, what trends are growing. Is there a new novel implant design that's coming out that makes sense that surgeons are looking for? So we challenged it in both form factor and ease of use, and then the business model. And so we're now challenging surgeons and hospitals to say, with an open platform on the market, why would you ever choose a closed platform from a capital redundancy, a capital cost redundancy, storage space, et cetera? So that's what we wake up every day trying to do. And it's fun.
Yeah, yeah, great. Now, I'm going to throw this to you. Orthopedic innovation today is engineering, of course, and device design, but you've done some work with reimbursement. Can you talk about the importance of that in the total ecosystem of innovation?
Yeah, right. So as I brought up before, there are kind of 5 players on this economic wheel, and ultimately the ones who hold the cash, the ones who ultimately pay for the procedures are CMS in a big way, and then private payers. So we'll just talk about CMS. If the procedure is not reimbursed, if the implants contained within that procedure are not reimbursed, it's very tough to enter the market. There's very little opportunity for private pay people to pull money out of their pocket and to make sure that they receive what they want in the healthcare system that exists today in the United States. So, we did partner with CMS, and we have received favorable reimbursement that really enables the uptick and the use of our technology. We came through the FDA with the Breakthrough Device Designation, which engendered favorability, not just with the FDA, but also with CMS. So we used that to get a new technology add-on payment, which the federal government has now encouraged surgeons and hospitals to consider this technology and really not put it at a financial disadvantage in terms of costing more for new innovation. So the new technology add-on payment is exactly as it describes it. It has an add-on payment for new technology, which typically necessarily costs more. The development of new technology it's a capital intensive process. So the federal government was behind our efforts to help us deliver this improved technology to the patients who need it. And so working hand in hand with CMS, not just to receive that new technology add-on payment, which is a time-based 2 to 3 years, but then also to petition and to work with CMS to maintain an elevated reimbursement to make sure that this new technology it's just not a flash in the pan, but it's a durable solution for long-term care for the years and decades to come. So it really is a partnership. It's not just an engineering team delivering something cool to the market that will cost more. It's a partnership with the payers and understanding their motivations and then helping them understand your technology and how it impacts the outcome opportunity for the patients, and really working with them. Not necessarily in every job has it been a cooperative effort with the federal government. We know that there's friction out there, but we've maintained a positive relationship with multiple federal agencies, be it the Patent and Trademark Office, be it the CMS, be it the FDA, to work with us. And of course, the CMS is in charge of reimbursement. So making sure that those are aligned is really important for commercial sustainability.
Yeah. John, anything?
No, I'm going to need to get your card at the end. You guys got advanced reimbursement. If you look at the total joint space in robotics, on a pure play, robotics and technology is potentially dilutive. And the reason I say that is everyone's using the same DRG 469, 470 code, which, call average reimbursement for Medicare inpatient joints is $14,000. There are some navigation and enabling technology codes on there, which are hit or miss whether or not you get advanced reimbursement. But for the sake of the conversation, potentially robotics is dilutive, right? Because you've got capital, service, disposables that is added on to that. Now, hospitals have invested in it for a reason, and that's through market consolidation and incremental volume. If you look at the intuitive model, right, that's what Da Vinci was built on, which was put in an enabling piece of technology, more patients will come, incremental volume of higher private pay patients that pays for the system, and you win on the top line versus bottom line. But now you look at the closed platform systems. Now, to meet a surgeon that like Smith & Nephew, Stryker, Zimmer, DePuy, you might have to adopt 2 or 3 robots. Now that capital cost, service cost is even higher, plus disposables. And then when you get into these utilization agreements, they're locking you into a price for 5 years. And if you look at that same DRG of 14,000, implants are generally 3,500 to 4,000 of that. So it's a high percentage of that DRG and that profit margin. So one, I'm going to talk to you now about how we get advanced reimbursement. But two is, if you look at open platform, our belief is by doing that, you will get more favorable partnerships with the implant partners and potentially give relief on your bottom line operational expense through implant spend, making it more competitive and relief from redundancy and capital. But you're correct. There is a decline in reimbursement. There's a decline in surgeon reimbursement. So surgeons have to find a way to do more procedures at a lower margin, or find a way to be more efficient in what they're doing. So right now, because of that dilution, we're looking at helping hospitals reduce capital spend and operational expense. And then through an easier to use system, if you can turn over that OR, less time in the OR, they can do more volume and capture that. But we'll talk to Niall about adding reimbursement later.
Right.
Well, I don't want to connect dots that aren't there, but can you comment on those are important factors in the ASC setting as more cases are moving in that direction? Do you guys fit into that model pretty well, I would imagine?
Yeah, so I think hospitals and ASCs are very different acquisition models. Their strategic capital in hospitals is under attack right now. And it's not only just robotics and joints. There's robots in spine. There's robots in soft tissue. So you've got hospital executives that almost have robot fatigue at this point, right? But they have different capital budgets.
Yeah.
But the clinician in a hospital setting is just saying, I want to use this. Someone else is paying for it. From that perspective. Then you move into the ASC setting, capital's at even more of a premium. Surgeons are making different decisions because they're now not only the clinician, but they wear a business hat. They wear a suit in the boardroom, and so now they're making top line, bottom line decisions from that perspective. So surgeons are making, I don't think, bad clinical decisions, but they're making different clinical decisions they would in a hospital setting versus an ASC setting. And also the reimbursement rate is much lower in the ASC setting. So it has to be efficient. If you look at our form factor, we think we're better placed for the ASC. Storage is at a premium in both hospital and ASC, even more so in the ASC. You look at instrumentation costs. So right now we think we can reduce capital costs through an open platform by 50% by just having one system that proliferates all of those implant needs. And then two is instrumentation, right? So if you have not only a piece of capital equipment to meet each surgeon's implant need, there's a set of trays, generally 2 to 3 trays just on robotics alone. So we can reduce that storage space. So it's multifactorial, but in the ASC, generally they want to find partners that are willing to bet on volume and a deeper partnership than just dropping off a piece of capital. They're similar, but very different at the same time.
Thanks. Just I have a few more questions left, but we want to leave some time at the end for your questions. So if you have anything, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Part of developing innovative technology is pushing through challenges, initial challenges, roadblocks. What can you both have great perspective on that? Just getting something off the ground and fighting through the difficult stages. I think that's important for people to hear and understand. Can you both comment on what you went through to reach where you are today?
Sure. It feels like yesterday. Excuse me. But just 8 years ago, when we founded the company, our first lab, I would say one of the features of our technology is mapped topography of the end plate. So an implant goes in between two vertebral bodies and matches the end plate. And so our first lab, boy, we really wanted to nail that particular feature. That was a real kind of wow moment where, all right, if we can match the undulating surfaces of the anatomy 1-to-1, boy, can you imagine what would happen in terms of healing, in terms of our ability to understand that interface. We get into the lab and we matched it 1-to-1, but there were some unpredictable kind of features that if certain elements of the anatomy are not properly removed, or they're not properly addressed, or they're removed, and then we subsequently want to rely on those features, it could be a real sticky situation. So that's just one kind of technical thing where, boy, we thought we had it nailed, and then we get in there and we inevitably learn something, and it really does have an opportunity for us to correct course and then ultimately improve our system. But just like any kind of startup, any kind of new technology, any new development activity, you're going to be faced with an, oh my God, I didn't expect that. And what can you do to help remedy that solution, to push forward through that obstacle and ultimately deliver, what you have in your mind as a successful outcome. So it happens. And it's fun, it's challenging, despite its initial frustration.
Yeah. I don't know who is the quote, but someone says if you're extremely prideful of your first product that goes out to market, you've launched too late. And what I mean by that is at Think Surgical, we did our first cases in September of 2023, and we knew we needed a feature that we didn't have yet, which was gap balancing, which is the data that the surgeons want. But new handheld wireless device that was going through an autoclave, smart tools, overhead tracking system. We chose to go to the market with what we knew was missing a feature to get it in the hands of surgeons, staff, learn from that in a limited market release. Because, I'm sure you know now, but you can do all the testing you want leading up to it, do all the labs, but once you put it into the real world, people don't necessarily follow your IFUs and instructions. So we took that first year and a half to really learn from the system to then go back and adopt our hardware, add the features and so forth. So there's challenges in that. You can do the best you can in the development cycle and have all the inputs, but when you put it into the market, that's where you really learn. So that was our first challenge, was just learning. Did our system, we had a hypothesis it was easier to use. Was it easier to use? Did surgeons like using it? Then you have to be very strategic about your roadmap of what you add next, because again, we couldn't wait another 5 years, so we've been doing incremental releases. And then really the biggest challenge we've had, it's been a 4-year journey, is the open platform. And that was one early on, we had to go get partnerships with all these implant companies. So I would say we started with the smaller players that didn't have robotics, and I would say probably didn't have the resources or dollars to invest in that, and we're feeling the pressure. But that took a lot of work to sign collaboration agreements, share CAD files, all of that information. But we knew on the back end of that, to be truly open platform, we had to devise a way that we could do it without needing those partnerships, because not all of the strategics were probably likely to join our platform due to their own enabling technology. And that was a 4-year process. We had a very developed FDA strategy. We did it in phases. And ultimately that was a risk, because at the end of it, the FDA could have said, we don't agree with your assessment. Thankfully they did. But that was an iterative process, and that's something we had to go to, and we had to pivot multiple times and do that. But I think what Niall was saying is you can't be too prideful about the product you launched. You have to listen to your users, get it out into the field, but be ready to make changes based on their feedback and do it quickly.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone have any questions for
Niall, for your product, your device, can you speak a little bit to the regulatory strategy for that continuous improvement you spoke to? Obviously, the FDA is a little more rigid in how they approach design and approvals. So what was that conversation like?
Yeah, so we did have to work with the FDA kind of more directly than typical implant development in prior life cycles. So, establishing that relationship with them, with the examiner, we kind of worked with them to help them understand our mission and our ability to treat patients, and really to kind of synchronize. We all have a mission, whether it's the FDA or the company, of improving patient outcomes. And so being able to communicate the opportunity of this product, of this technology, to improve patient outcomes really helped us. It was not an adversarial relationship with them, which it sometimes could be in prior life cycles where, hey, I just want this cleared, and then you get into kind of a back and forth with the FDA. We helped them understand where we're going, and we ultimately reached the conclusion that this device is substantially equivalent to an existing predicate device, and we cleared it through a 510K process. So really, collaboration was kind of the different ingredient.
No? Okay. I'll leave you guys with this one. What technology or trends do you see really having the greatest impact on orthopedics in the next 5 years? Obviously, you're biased with your technologies, but maybe just look beyond that and just broad strokes and just give us a wide-eye view of the industry, from your opinion.
Sure. I would say personalization, whether it's our technology or John's technology, really understanding the objectives of surgery as described by the surgeon and as understood by the patient, and incorporating those objectives into whatever solution it is. The robotic plan is personalized to a patient. Our surgeon-driven surgical planning is bespoke to that particular patient with those particular pathologies and anatomy. And then the implant itself is tailored to achieve those goals as described by the surgeon. So this whole personalization of medicine is where we're headed. And we saw it yesterday in the keynote speech. We saw it out of Jonathan today. And of course, I'm a big proponent of the mass personalization of medicine going forward.
Yeah, I think it's personalization. You know, we just talked about reimbursement and so forth. I don't think the macroeconomic environmental factors of reimbursement are changing. I don't see reimbursement going back up. So I think, to me, it depends on what your endpoint is for the future, right?
Yeah.
The next 2 to 3 years, I think it's maximizing ease of use right now and integrating into ORs very seamlessly so that when you're not adding time to someone's day, you're not making it more complex, you're providing them the opportunity to do more procedures today. Beyond that, right? I mean, if I look in robotics, everyone's using arrays and point matching. Those are generally the two biggest pain points in robotics right now because it's different from what they do today. And then I think ultimately at some point, if someone can aggregate a data set to answer, is kinematic alignment better? Is functional alignment better? Is mechanical alignment? Is there a specific implant? So I would say it's data-backed evidence in terms of how to treat a certain patient, but that goes with personalization. I just don't know how close that is from that perspective. So I agree with Niall. It's personalization at the moment, but it's personalization. It can't be at the detraction of ease of use, right? It's great to have personalization, but if you're busting up an OR, taking too much time, burdening the staff, right? There's staff shortages, there's nursing outages, all those things. So if you're not meeting the customer where they are and you're making their day easier, no matter how good your tech is, it's going to be hard to change that.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up? Nope. All right. Well, thank you both for joining me today, and really enjoyed the conversation, and congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, everyone.